guys, and welcome back to Chapter 7 of Naya Nuki. Now remember, you need to pay close attention to the story so that you can answer those questions with complete sentences and restate the question. If you don't know the answer, go back and re-listen. Let's get started. Chapter 7, Always Alert. Naya Nuki sat thinking of those mornings at home. The birds sang, the air was still. The water in the creek rippled over its rocky bed. She felt safer than she had since her escape, and was enjoying the sights and the sounds of the early morning, but she wished she were home. Naya Nuki's peaceful moments were broken by a rumbling noise in the distance. She recognized the sound quickly. She left the willows and ran to a nearby cottonwood tree. She scrambled up the tree, taking her belongings with her. The sound was much louder now, and a huge dust cloud would be seen in the rays of the morning sun. The rumble sounded like distant thunder. Naya Nuki looked north and soon could see a great herd of buffalo moving directly towards the tree in which she was safely perched. The great beasts were moving at a slow trot on both sides of the creek. The sound shook, and the tree swayed as this herd of more than 1,000 bison rumbled along. Naya Nuki had never seen such a sight. In minutes her tree was surrounded by these enormous animals. Dust caused Naya Nuki to sneeze often. The great bodies, heads down, seemed to roll by in an endless stream. The buffalo had huge grayish back humps, shaggy heads, and swishing tails, and ran side by side, often bumping into each other. Naya Nuki held tightly to the shaking tree as she looked down at this amazing sight. She could not help but think of the food and the hides that were passing just below her. She remembered at the time of her capture, her people were on their way to hunt these great beasts. Now she sat just above 100 of them. Naya Nuki remembered the kills the men made in the hunt the year before her capture. Her people were so hungry for meat that they ate raw the first animal killed. The favorite parts were the heart and liver, the brains and tongue, and the most tender parts of the muscle tissue were eaten next. Never did the meal taste better. After more buffalo were killed, meat was stripped from the bones in long, thin strands to be hung and dried. Hides were scraped and stretched to dry. The horns were saved and used for drinking vessels. Everyone worked quickly so the return to the safety of the mountains could be made as soon as possible. How strange everything seemed now. Naya Nuki was so far from her people, and all alone in a tree above the huge herd of these tremendous beasts. As most of the herd passed, Naya Nuki looked across the stream from her tree. She saw several buffalo cows and their calves straggling behind the main herd. One calf lagged far back from its mother and the herd. It was curious about everything, and in no hurry. Suddenly a pack of wolves came racing out of the trees and down the gentle slope towards the lone calf. The little one didn't have a chance. The wolves made the kill quickly, tearing open the neck of the calf. Cow buffalo do not defend their calves when the herd is moving. The calves must keep up or run the risk of attack and death. Naya Nuki watched as the pack of hungry wolves tore the carcass to shreds. The whole incident lasted less than an hour. After the wolves left, ravens, hawks, and other scavengers would clean any remaining meat off the bones. When the wolves were safely out of the way, Naya Nuki climbed down from the gnarled cottonwood tree, jumped the creek, and ran west. Her first day of travel started with great excitement. She had traveled all the night before and planned to keep going all day as well. It would be exhausting, but she was much too excited to sleep. It seemed good to be moving during the daytime. She could see much better, but so could the enemy. Naya Nuki stayed in the high grass, bushes, and trees whenever possible. She avoided any trails, roads, or places where she could be easily seen. She stopped often, looking carefully in every direction. When she was moving, Naya Nuki kept looking ahead and from side to side for any danger. To the south she could see the path of the great river as it meandered through the rolling plains. She could seldom see the water in the great river, only the trees and the bushes that lined its sides. After traveling for a whole night and a whole day without sleep, Naya Nuki was very tired. She was also very hungry. She made an outcropping to rock in which grew many dwarf cedar trees. It was a perfect place to hide for the night. Nuki took time to enjoy her biggest meal since her escape. She ate meat, roots, and berries. She had water from a nearby spring that bubbled from the earth. She took extra time to pull grass to lay over her ground beneath the dwarf cedar trees. She made a comfortable bed and rolled up in her buffalo hide, and soon was sound asleep. In the middle of the night, Nuki woke up shivering and cold. She had rolled out of her buffalo hide. She quickly looked around and then rolled herself back into the hide, and when she was warm again, went back to sleep. The squawk of a raven woke Nuki. She sat up in the bitter cold. Dense fog was everywhere, and it was hard to see even 100 feet in any direction. Nuki knew better than to move from her camp, when it was impossible to see approaching danger. The sun was up for several hours before the fog lifted enough for her to travel safely. At noon, Nuki came to a large river. The search for a safe crossing began. It was so much easier in the daylight. She walked north upstream along the river bank. At several places she walked on the rocks, right at the river's edge, and once came to a pile of driftwood wedged between two huge rocks. Nuki stopped to examine the pile of wood more closely. Soon she was digging into the pile of twigs and small branches. She smiled as if she had came to a cache of wild artichokes deep in the pile. These white roots, 1 to 3 inches long, are delicious and nourishing. Nuki and Sacagawea often found them in piles of driftwood. Mice collect the artichokes and store them in there. Nuki ate a few and put the rest with her food supply. This river was wide but not very deep. Nuki didn't bother to use a log to support her. She made sure no one was in view and entered the water to begin the crossing. She waded more than halfway across and floated slowly through the deep spot. Minutes later, she waded the rest of the distance to the safety of the willow bushes on the opposite bank. She had made the crossing quickly. Nuki was shocked to see 2 log rafts pulled up on the bank hidden in the willows. Indians used rafts to cross rivers and to transport buffalo meat, hides, and other goods downstream. Immediately, Nuki realized the danger. Enemies could be close by. She must be careful not to walk into their view. Quickly she moved north and found a thick clump of willows. She burrowed in the center of the bushes, where she was completely out of sight. Here she waited, listening for any sound of danger. After 30 minutes of hiding, Nuki formed a plan. She would move quickly from one clump of bushes to another, staying out of sight until she felt it was safe to dash to the next hiding place. It took her a long time to cover only 1/2 mile this way, but she would take no chances of being caught. 1/2 mile from the rafts, a tiny creek trickled through a ravine on its way down to the river at an angle from the northwest. Nuki moved quickly into the ravine and headed away from the dangerous river, out of the view of any passerby. In the ravine, Nuki could not see very far in any direction. The ravine was 20 to 30 feet deep. She took time to climb the side of the ravine for a view of the surrounding country. She did this several times. Each time she saw nothing to cause her to change her course. After going a mile in the ravine, Nuki emerged and ran carefully through the tall grass. It seemed good to be able to see for a long distance in every direction again. She slowed her pace and was soon walking at a steady rate. She stopped just before dark each day, always in a safe place to spend the night. She ate each night before going to sleep and each morning after getting up. She did not eat during the day, but drank lots of water along the way. Even at this rate, her food supply would be gone in a few days. For 2 days, Nuki moved without trouble. On the 9th day, Nuki stood on a high hill looking south toward the great river. Here she saw a huge river flowing from the south into the great river. She remembered this place. She and her captors had camped near the meeting place of these 2 large rivers on the way east. The water in the river from the south was green and clearer than the muddy brown water from the great river. Nuki heard her captors talk about this river from the south. They said it came from the land where the stone was yellow. We know that Nuki was looking at the Yellowstone River entering the Missouri. The place where she stood is near the present-day border between North Dakota and Montana. She looked down at this scene, for a few minutes, and then she turned to resume her journey west. It was late afternoon on the same day when Nuki saw dust rise in the distance directly in front of her. She rushed to a hiding place in some chokecherry bushes and watched as the dust moved closer to her. This time the dust wasn't caused by the movement of buffalo. Nuki could see riders on horseback. She did not move a muscle. She counted 11 braves. They led pack horses carrying quarters of buffalo carcasses to hunt. Their hunt had been very successful. They looked tired and concentrated on the trail back to their village. They passed 200 yards from Nuki's hiding place. Nuki watched as the riders disappeared. Then she moved away from her hiding place. She stopped early that evening to pick berries and to pull some wild carrots from a damp meadow. She found a large hollow log that had been burned out by a fire. She could crawl inside with room to spare, a perfect place to spend the night. Nuki ate fresh berries and wild carrots with her dried meat and roots. She slept soundly inside this charred log and woke up only 3 times during this night. Usually she woke up 6 or 8 times to look and listen for anything that could prove dangerous. The morning of the 10th day was clear and cold. There was frost everywhere. Nuki was up before the sun touched the earth around her. Fresh berries and wild carrots tasted so good. She drank ice-cold water and began to walk west in the early morning light. The sun warmed the earth, and Nuki moved easily over the prairie. This would be a good day. She could see for miles. There were more trees now, most of which grew in ravines and near many streams that had to be crossed. She moved at her usually steady pace. It was mid-morning when Nuki saw another creek ahead of her. She sensed that there was something different about this stream. She slowed her pace and stayed low and out of sight as she came into the creek. Here she climbed a cottonwood tree for a better view. Her caution was well taken. Just a short distance downstream and on the opposite shore were the remains of a fresh Indian camp. A large band had stayed on this site. Nuki avoided the spot by going a full mile north before crossing the creek. She moved slowly, keeping out of sight, by bending low as she walked in the waist-high grass. Several times she slowly straightened up for a quick look around, and then moved on. And that will do it for the end of Chapter 7. Now remember, you've got those questions to do. Use those complete sentences. Restate the question. Make sure you click submit. All right, guys, have a great rest of your day. We'll see you tomorrow for Chapter 8.